This is tape number ET10 from the library of the Howard Thurman Educational Trust. Two meditations by Howard Thurman. This is side one, entitled The Country of the Heart.
I'm continuing my reading from Jane Steger's Leaves from a Secret Journal. Last night, as I was thinking intently about the Spirit of God within each one of us, and especially of that Spirit as within myself and in life, a curious, quite definite feeling came over me as though I had entered into another country, flowed out into something wider, passed, as it were, to another plane. There was nothing strained or unnatural about it, nor was there the slightest mental confusion. I was perfectly aware of myself and of the surroundings of my room. But the point of consciousness appeared to have slipped from my head to my heart, from thought to emotion, perhaps. This is the country of the heart, I found myself exclaiming. It was a further glimpse of an experience I had had several months ago, which was half a dream and half the thoughts following immediately upon awakening. In the dream part, I saw a sort of field or prairie dotted over with what appeared to be the burrows of animals leading into the ground. But I seemed to know that in reality these were not animal runs, but were human personalities through which, if one walked, one would emerge into another world. I waked then, but still strong upon me was the belief brought back from the illuminating depths of sleep that every human being is a gateway into another world, a world which we enter by walking through ourselves. That is, by sinking deeper and deeper into ourselves, pressing open one door of consciousness after another. I'm convinced that there is a wonderful world, a wider, richer life, a more intense joy and beauty close at hand, almost in touch of us, which our blind eyes and blinder hearts have not the grace to perceive. As we plod along our anxious road, we never lift up our eyes to it or open our ears to its melody, and yet sometimes our hearts tell us in a vague wistfulness that we have missed the way, have somehow wandered from the path, and are very far from home. When I sit on the porch of an evening in late summer, the air is filled with the rasping of the katydids. There they are in the locust trees, almost in hand's reach of me, and yet we are in two different worlds. I have some small knowledge of their world, but what have they of my world? They might indeed entirely deny my very existence. Yet there we are out in the same summer night, side by side. Just as I am close to the katydids, so I believe that there is another world and other beings as close to me, of whose existence I guess as little as those jolly green fiddlers in the locust trees guess of mine. This world which I believe to be there, just beyond the gray veils of our present consciousness, I have called the country of the heart. Every now and again we catch glimpses of it and know that if we might enter into it, we should not find ourselves as here strangers and wanderers, but spirits returned to our larger selves in the place where we belong unutterably and exquisitely at home. The higher we get in the scale of development, the further we seem to get away from this. This is because our own self-consciousness, our trying, as it were, to manage things for ourselves confuses our consciousness of him. There is another dimension to the insight with which Jane Steger is wrestling here. She talks, of course, about the thin veil that separates our world from another world, the feeling that the consciousness of the individual is the opening from a larger world of life and meaning is not a new idea. It has been expressed in many ways, and the thing that is so amazing and exciting to my kind of mind is the fact that this sort of notion is a part of the materials of much of what is going on in the whole scientific development that is upon our world. We have discovered, for instance, over and over again, that there is a way by which it is possible to communicate with animals, even though we do not speak their language as such, or they do not speak our language, but it seems as if any form of conscious life is but a manifestation of life, and the difference in expressions of life is the difference in the context of the manifestation. Now, when I was a boy living in Florida, I had a rather extraordinary experience that illustrated this at another level. One day I went across the way to visit my chum, and as I started up around the house, his father rapped on the window pane and urged me to come around and come through the front door. And when I came into the front door and into a room where the father was standing, he pointed through the open window to the backyard. And there in the backyard, my chum's little baby sister, about 3 or 4 months old, was sitting in the sand playing with a rattlesnake. She'd pull the snake back as he would try to crawl away. She would turn him over on his back, and they were having a delightful time. The father sent me out to stand on the other side of the house, and my chum was standing on the left-hand side, so that we would not let any adult come around to introduce into this elemental experience of the ground of vitality a principle of disturbance, fear, anxiety, so that when this principle is introduced, each form of life jumps, as it were, back into the tight context of its manifestation and looks out through that context at the other. And this creates fear and enmity. Now this is one of the extraordinary things about life, that my life and your life represents a separate and distinct consciousness. My thoughts, the history of my life, all of the manifold contexts by which my life gets its meaning and its significance, and the manifold context by which your life gets its meaning and significance, these are but the facades of life. But whenever you have an intimate, primary experience with another human being, and you get past the point when you are trying to relate to each other by the symbolism of words or by tokens of testing, there does come a moment in the relationship when it seems as if you and the other person relate to each other by going down and coming up on the inside of the other person rather than trying to relate across this way. Now this notion is that all of life is one, and that wherever I am able to penetrate behind the particular facade, wherever I'm able to go behind the context of differentiation, I come upon the same ebb and flow of creativity, the ground of being, the ground of vitality, in which all of the individual expressions have their meaning and their significance. And in the language of religion, it is this ground that God provides, and those who are expressive of it are expressions of Him. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer.
This is tape number ET10 from the library of the Howard Thurman Educational Trust. This is side 2, entitled Death, a Part of Life.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. I'm beginning today another facet of our discussion of working philosophies of life, and will do the broadcast which was interrupted last week. The leaves were falling from the great oak at the meadow's edge. They were falling from all the trees. One branch of the oak reached high above the others and stretched far out over the meadow. Two leaves clung to its very tip. "It isn't the way it used to be," said one leaf to the other. "No," the other leaf answered. "So many of us have fallen off tonight, we are almost the only ones left on our branch." "You never know who's going to go next," said the first leaf. Even when it was warm and the sun shone, A storm or a cloudburst would come sometimes, and many leaves were torn off, though they were still young. You never know who's going to go next. The sun seldom shines now, sighed the second leaf, and even when it does, it gives no warmth. We must have warmth again. Can it be true, said the first leaf? Can it really be true that others come to take our places when we are gone, and after them still others and more and more? It is really true, whispered the second leaf. We can't even begin to imagine. It's beyond our powers. It makes me very sad, said the first leaf. They were silent a while, and then the first leaf said quietly to herself, why must we fall? The second leaf asked, what happens to us when we have fallen? We sink down, down. What is under us? The first leaf answered, I don't know. Some say one thing, some another, but nobody knows. The second leaf asked, do we feel anything? Do we know anything about ourselves when we are down there? The first leaf answered, who knows? Not one of all those down there has ever come back to tell us about it. They were silent again. Then the first leaf said tenderly to the other, don't worry so much about it. You're trembling. Oh, that's nothing, the second leaf answered. I tremble at the least thing now. I don't feel so sure of my hold as I used to. Let's not talk any more about such things, said the first leaf. The other replied, no, we'll let be, but what else shall we talk about? She was silent, but went on after a little while, which of us will go first? There's still plenty of time to worry about that, the other leaf assured her. Let's remember how beautiful it was, how wonderful, when the sun came out and shone so warmly that we thought we'd burst with life. Do you remember? And the morning dew and the mild and splendid nights? Now the nights are dreadful, the second leaf complained, and there is no end to them. We shouldn't complain, said the first leaf gently. We've outlived many, many others. Have I changed much? Asked the second leaf shyly but determinedly. Not in the least, the first leaf assured her. You only think so because I've gotten to be so yellow and ugly. But it's different in your case. You're fooling me, the second leaf said. No, really, the first leaf exclaimed eagerly. Believe me, you're as lovely as the day you were born. Here and there may be a little yellow spot, but it's hardly noticeable and only makes you handsomer, believe me. Thanks, whispered the second leaf, quite touched. I don't believe you, not altogether, but I thank you because you're so kind. You've always been so kind to me. I'm just beginning to understand how kind you are. Hush, said the other leaf, and kept silent herself, for she was too troubled to talk any more. Then they were both silent. Hours passed. A moist wind blew cold and hostile through the treetops. Ah, now, said the second leaf, Then her voice broke off. She was torn from her place and spun down. Winter had come. And then one other thing to go along with this. This is called a song of living. Because I have loved life, I shall have no sorrow to die. I have sent up my gladness on wings to be lost in the blue of the sky. I have run and leaped with the rain. I have taken the wind to my breast. My cheek, like a drowsy child, to the face of the earth I have pressed. Because I have loved life, I shall have no sorrow to die. I have kissed young love on the lips. I've heard his song to the end. I have struck my hand like a seal in the loyal hand of a friend. I have known the peace of heaven, the comfort of work done well. I have longed for death in the darkness and risen alive out of hell. Because I have loved life, I shall have no sorrow to die. I give a share of my soul to the world where my course is run. I know that another shall finish the task I must leave undone. I know that no flower, no flint was in vain on the path I trod. As one looks on a face through a window, through life I have looked on God. Because I have loved life, I shall have no sorrow to die. Death is a common part of the experience of all living things. It represents a radical form of failure, the failure of the organism. All life moves in a cycle from birth to its end, and the cycle is a very logical one. Birth, and babyhood, childhood, youth, manhood, maturity, old age. But death is not a part of this cycle. Death, in some sense, is outside of the cycle, for it may invade the cycle at any particular point. At babyhood, childhood, youth, manhood, old age, death is outside the cycle. Sooner or later, then, every human being must come to grips with the fact of death as a part of his experience of life. Now, this does not mean that the contemplation of death should bring morbidity. It does not mean that it is something of necessity that needs to be dreaded. But it is something which has to be faced. Therefore, all religions of any kind, however significant they may be, know that they must, at some point, if they are to meet the deepest needs of the human spirit, they must give to the human spirit some insight, some feeling tone, some preparation for dealing with this fundamental and basic aspect of life. There are 2 or 3 very simple suggestions that I would make about the meaning of death. In the first place, death is something that belongs in human experience. In all experience, whatever the nature of the experience may be, each person is aware that he deals with his experiences at 2 levels. As a participant, as a person who is doing what he is doing, and also as a person who is observing himself as he does what he is doing. So that this twofold dimension is the way in which all human beings relate to the experiences of their lives, as an observer of themselves participating in the things that they are doing. Now, it seems to me all aspects of life, every phase of life, in this sense, is episodic. It is something that the individual is experiencing, but no phase of life is capable of containing all that the individual is. There is a margin left in which the individual, as the observer, is never completely involved in the thing that he's doing. Now, death is one of the events in life. And it belongs in the category of events, in the scale of events. And therefore, even with reference to death, the individual is a participant in his own death, but there is a sense in which he stands outside of it. For the human spirit has the ability to detach itself from the body. Now, this means then that death is something that takes place in life. There's a sense, you see, in which life and death are twins, are aspects of something larger that we call life, but unfortunately we must use the same word. So that there is a sense in which life and death are one. There's a sense in which life contains both life and death. Therefore, death is a thing which happens to, not to life, but which happens in life. It is an experience in life, but there is a sense in which a man knows that something within him is never quite penetrated, never quite touched, never quite involved in the experience which he's going through. Therefore, all religions insist then that which is most fundamentally representative of the human spirit is that which transcends both time and space, transcends all events. And it is this dimension that is eternal, and it is this fulfillment through which the human life goes that cause men to feel that they are experiencing eternal life. Because I have loved life in this sense, then I shall have no sorrow to die. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer.